Alright guys, welcome back to our session on option explicit and why we should always declare them at the top of the code. So having option explicit is considered good practice because having option explicit forces us to declare our variables prior to using it during design time, right? Prior to assigning values onto it. So what's the advantage of declaring variable, you might ask? Well, the reason why we should declare variable prior to assigning any value to it, right, is because if somewhere down the line you were to make a typo on the variable name, VBA will be able to identify the source of the error. So if you don't have the option explicit, you do not have to declare the variable. You could just assign values to the variable and perform operations to the variable without declaring them. So the issue with it is that, well, it might seem good at first, but the problem is when you make mistakes, right, on the variable name, there is no way for us to identify the mistake that you've made. So it makes debugging a lot harder. And so if someone is trying to run your code and you have option explicit declared, then it forces you to declare your code. So if you make a mistake, it basically catches error during design time, as opposed to not having option explicit. Then you just assign values to the variable. You don't have declaration. So the issue is that since your variables are not even declared, it's hard to keep track of your variable, right? It's hard to keep track of the variable, right? So it's a good practice. That's the reason why it's a good practice. Okay. So if I want to enable option explicit. So this method is used prior to opening up a module. You go to tool options and you either check or uncheck your require variable declaration. So if your require variable declaration is checked, when you open a module, you should see the statement of the option explicit. If it's unchecked, you don't see the option explicit. Okay. So if I leave it unchecked and then I just go into my module, okay, now it's unchecked. So but if I could always add on to the statement whenever I want, right? Now it's option explicit is there. So if I want to remove it, I just remove it. Okay, this method is used prior to opening the module, either to have that statement or not, right? But you can always add your statement or remove it anytime you want. Okay, so I have option explicit. I'm going to do a very simple example. Sub option. I'm just going to say exp. Okay, and I'm just going to have the case with the option explicit first, right? Or without the option explicit. So I'm going to remove the option explicit, and then I'm just going to have some value. A equals to 50, AA equals, and I have B equals to 70. And then I intended to assign value A to 50 plus 20, but instead of having A, I made a typo down the line. Okay, I made a typo down the line, and this value is being cascaded downwards. So as you could see, now A is 50. It's not, and we intended it to be 70, right? We intended it to be 70, but Excel is not going to recognize that we made a typo. So when I perform operation, it's still going to take on the value 50 without alerting me that, well, you might have made a mistake here, right? And the code will run. The code would run as you know, everything is perfect, but there is an issue there, right? There is an issue, right? So I can just, you know, if I debug.print A, okay, if I debug.print A and I run the code, you see A is still 50, right? It's not even recognizing that AA was a mistake, a typo, right? So that is in the simplest term. Now I have option explicit. I have option explicit, okay? And then it forces me, if the moment I don't declare my variable, it runs into error, variable not declared, right? So you see the advantage there, right? My variable has to be declared. Now dim A is long. I'm going to dim B as long, okay? Now I intended to add 20 onto my original value of A, but I made a mistake. I made a typo, right? I made a typo. So I run the code. You see, right away, as soon as I try to run the code, it says, well, AA is something is wrong there, mate. You have not, you know, this thing you have not declared, right? So that sums up what option explicit is all about, right? So I hope you guys understand why it's considered good programming practice. Okay, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Take care.